Yes, we're going to return to the inflation story. But first, let's get the reaction of the Tanzanian former President Benjamin Mkapa about the European Partnership Agreement that the European Union wants as a trade document to be signed by Africans. 16 countries in West Africa, only about 2 or 3 have signed. Nigeria has refused to sign, amongst others, saying this is not in the best interest of the country's manufacturing and foreign trade sector. But what is the what has the Tanzanian president has to say? Let's listen to him.
Your president calmed my nerves in his speech when he confirmed that the position has not changed. Some of my European friends are not very happy with me when I characterize EPA as the modern-day equivalent of the Berlin Conference Treaty. While the Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885 balkanized Africa among 13 European powers as a guaranteed source of raw materials and market, how are the EPAs different from that? In reality, Africa negotiated these EPAs under unprecedented economic duress and coercion. In the process, African governments were arm-twisted into glossing over some very pertinent aspects of the agreement, especially for EU's economic expediency. The common element at both Berlin and Brussels is that Africa is not allowed latitude to conduct trade, industrial, and development policy for her own development, but for the development of Europe. I am aware that most of African trade ministers have privately and tacitly rejected the EPAs, but in fact, they have acquiesced. In private whisperings, not many Africans or policymakers are happy with the deal. By this, there is a certain sense of helplessness. The European Union has been negotiating the EPAs with the Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific countries, a fully reciprocal trade arrangement between EU and ACP to replace the previous non-reciprocal preferential trade across access of ACP countries to EU. While the exploitation and looting of Africa's enormous natural resources during the colonial and the immediate post-colonial eras is history, we cannot simply take it as a misfortune borne patiently as though it had not been. We must be driven by the plea of the Hausa proverb. It is to stand up that one changes from sitting. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, while in the region I come from, some of us are considered as lone crusaders against the economic partnership agreements. What gives me twinges of disquiet is the effects of these agreements will have to our ambition to industrialize, to economically integrate, and develop sustainably as nations, but especially as regions. We were told that in order to continue to have access to European markets, Africa is required to eliminate tariffs on over 80% of imports from the European Union. In some cases, they will have to abolish all export duties and taxes. In others, countries can retain existing export taxes but not increase them or introduce new laws. They will be called upon to eliminate all quantitative restrictions and meet all kinds of other intrusive and destructive conditionalities that literally tie the hands of African governments from deploying the same kinds of instruments that all countries that have industrialized applied to build competitive national economies. To me, this is an invitation to commit economic suicide. And you have made the right call to reject the EPAs. There are a range of effects the EPAs will have on you and certainly on our economies in East Africa. Let me just mention 3. First, EPAs will put your regional trade and integration at risk. You will find that most of the products that you are producing locally are in fact traded regionally in ECOWAS. If we acquiesce to the EPA, and its corollary liberalization, EU competitiveness will certainly jeopardize your regional trade. EU products are likely to flood your market and displace domestic and regional production. Second, EPAs also oblige your governments to undertake significant reforms and design and create new policies which will have significant costs attached, including adjustment costs and revenue loss as a consequence of tariff elimination. In our region, the European Union has vehemently refused to include a development matrix in EPA. Instead, the burden of assembling development capital is left to the recycled, unreliable, and cumbersome European Development Fund and the Aid for Trade program. Third, the elimination of tariffs will also have an adverse impact on state revenues.
A former president of Tanzania, Benjamin Mkapa, a very staunch advocate against the signing of the European Partnership Agreement of Trade and Industrialization of the African continent.